Welcome back to Exquisitely Aligned. I'm your host, Gina Meyer Vincent. Here we help you to leave the one-size-fits-all life behind and step into your one-of-a-kind life, where you live life on your own terms, making your even bigger impacts. And essentially, you become exactly what is missing in the world today. Today, I have with me someone who has done exactly that. Today, I'm introducing you to Kavita. Sahai is a recovering workaholic from the world of finance turned medicine woman. I love that on so many levels. Welcome, Kavita. I'm excited to have you with me today.
I'm so excited to be here.
So, Kavita, a workaholic. I can raise my hand and say, yes, been there, done that. Sometimes it happens again. Turned medicine woman. Let's talk about that a little bit. And then I know we're going to jump into the art of conversation because that's something we both share. But tell me, what did that look like and feel like for you? And I think we said from the world of finance.
Yeah. So I started my career, it's funny, I was related to all these doctors. And so growing up, everyone sort of, that was just the path, being Indian. And I saw Pretty Woman and I thought, oh, I want to do that. Not Julia Roberts, but Richard Gere. I was like, whatever he does looks really cool. Right?
Thank you for clarifying.
But at that time, without Google, I didn't know what it was. So, after some digging, it turns out what he does was some form of private equity. So I went into mergers and acquisitions and then into private equity. But as all things that look glamorous on TV in real life, what that meant was my toothbrush, my pajamas, everything was at work. I worked over 100 hours a week. I made a lot of money, but had no time to spend it.
Right. I think that's an important thing that some people don't understand. Money is lovely. For me, it's energy. It's an exchange. You get to use it for other things. But if you're making a lot of money and it's sitting in the bank and you're exhausted with your toothbrush, like you said, at your desk, that's not fun. It's no way to live. Yeah.
No. And I think while I seemed successful, I didn't feel successful, right? Mm-hmm. So it was that world view of like, well, yes, of course you are. You have an office and a view and a secretary but inside I was completely falling apart. Yeah, right. Exactly. I was a great, it was a great thing to talk about at parties, but not something that actually felt, not that I could go to any parties anyway, but.
Right. I'm sure you got the invitations. It's just you couldn't attend. Right. Exactly. And I think that's important to talk about because, oftentimes people think that in this one size fits all life that we need to check the boxes, right? Okay, beautiful view, has her own office, has her own business, and money in the bank, a beautiful whatever, car, house, this, that. But if we're not feeling fulfilled, then really, what is it all about? I mean, I always say walk down the hall of the ICU and peer into the open doors. And just get a feeling for what really is important. When you see either someone laying in bed alone with no family around them or, tons of family around them, everyone, holding hands in prayer or in tears or whatever the situation, you realize that all those things that you checked off the boxes don't really matter. And so how old
goes from this world from achieving, right? Like you're always trying to get the next checkbox, the next promotion, the next brand school, the next thing. But nothing actually satisfies you. It's just this chase of you don't know what. So finally I hit a wall. I just had Post-it notes everywhere. My brain fog was incredible. I just couldn't remember, how old I was. Probably lack of sleep, right?
Yeah.
And from years of just drinking coffee and eating out, I had probably completely ruined my gut.
Mm-hmm.
So any supplement or any type of diet change, it really wasn't working because, as you think of the leaky bucket, everything I was eating that was good nutrient-wise was just kind of flowing right through, right? There was just nothing.
Yeah.
So I came across, at the time I was doing consumer product turnarounds, and I came across a lovely woman who was a botanist who had an aromatherapy company. And I was just fascinated because all I knew of essential oils was sort of the MLMs. And so I had them because I bought them from a friend, and wasn't using them right. As I turned out, I was just putting it directly on my skin, which is terrible. And but she had sort of pre-formulated them as sort of like nature's medicine cabinet. And so they worked, and they worked because essential oils are the back door into your system that bypass the gut. So it's the only thing that's going to bypass sort of bad gut health. So as soon as I started feeling better, I was like, oh, what is this witch oil? And into the world. So I left that world of finance, and consulting kind of behind, and then went in and helped her grow that company, and then ended up, we ended up selling, and then I ended up deciding to do it full time. And during that time, I completely dove in. So I got certified in aromatherapy, Ayurveda, yoga. I just went full, I say medicine, but it's really like plant lady, right? I was like, even from a skincare standpoint, I was like, wow, we really need oils for our skin. That's what our skin is made up of. And that's really what for generations people have used. And so it just became oil became an obsession.
Right. Yep. Beautiful. And so what age were you, or you don't have to tell us your age, or how long ago, either one, was it when you realized, like, this is not for me, this is more fulfilling, I'm going down this path?
Yeah. So it was about 14 years ago.
Yeah. Lovely. Lovely. So was that before you were married and with kids?
No, I was married. I was actually married quite young. I was married at 23, but it was when I was pregnant. So with my firstborn.
Yeah. No, it's always fun to see where are we at when these things hit and finally make sense. And I mean, so many things we can talk about. When you had spoken about that, growing up in an Indian family surrounded by MDs, right? And that was the natural path per se. It's hard, I think, for people to break out, break free, do something different like you did. You did try something different now again. So did you find your family supporting you at the first time when you were going after Richard Gere's career, and then now after your own career?
Yeah. So it was really funny when I told my parents I was going into banking. They were like, "So we give you our deposit slips?" I was like, "No, I take large companies and put them together." Not that there's anything wrong with being a teller, but no, this is like a big deal. It's like really cool that I broke in. I'm the only woman and the only minority in the whole room, but my parents have always been supportive, and I think they would have been supportive no matter what I did. All the expectation and pressure was really self-imposed. When your whole tribe is very high achieving,
correct.
You obviously feel that pressure, but it wasn't something where my parents were not the traditional ones that were like, you have to do medicine. Although I did have an aunt tell me, why don't you be a doctor first and then go do whatever this other thing is?
Right. I've heard that before. Not me personally, but from other people, like, well, just go get that degree and then you can do whatever you want. It's like, oh my gosh, what a waste of energy, time, money, all your resources, brain power. But yes, that's how some people think.
Well, it's a safety net, right? They're just
correct.
They're afraid that if you fail, what will happen? And I think,
yes,
for me, it was more that I just got to such a breaking point that I was more scared of what would happen if I stayed.
Right. And I think people don't realize that till it gets to that point. What if I stay here? I mean, I was a department store buyer. I went to school for that, for fashion, and I loved everything I did, but the environment was so toxic. I mean, just incredible. It was palpable when one of my resources would arrive. They'd be like, it's a bad day in the office. We can just feel it, what's going down now. And it was this roller coaster. And no matter where you came, with your energy in the morning, by the time you left, you were deflated, exhausted, and it wasn't healthy. And I was young and I knew I had to get out of there. It was time. And, my dad said, you can flip burgers at McDonald's. And I was like, but
between.
Right. Is this what it's come to? But, the reality is I could have, if I needed to, I could have flipped burgers at McDonald's just to get away from that. Even though I owned a condo, I had two pets waiting for me. I lived by myself. I had a car. I had all the things that needed an income, a decent income, not flipping burgers income. At the lowest level at McDonald's, but it was so true. And I was glad he said that and understood, like, just get out of there. You don't look like yourself anymore. That kind of we lose our glow. We lose why we're here. And I think that's so important. So, and I love anything alternative medicine. I am married to a doctor, so I do support him and what he does, and
I am too, by the way.
Yeah, and all of his education and so forth, and how he's able to help people. But you typically, personally, always go the first route, alternative. Coming like you from a yoga background, nearly 2 decades, or if not more, teaching yoga and loving acupuncture and anything that is beyond picking up a prescription somewhere.
Right.
Then I'm raising my hand. So what was the biggest change there when you started it? Well, had you, prior to meeting the botanist who was doing the oils, had you explored Ayurveda? I mean, coming from an Indian background, not going to assume, but for those who don't know, Ayurvedic comes from India. It is phenomenal, beyond belief. And it's something we study when we're in yoga teacher training. And it's something it's been around for centuries, right? Longer than our prescription drugs. And it's a great way of understanding each body as being unique and then treating it with remedies that are unique to it, not your son, your daughter, your husband, or your next door neighbor, instead of a prescription that everybody receives. So had you had background in that before, or exposure or anything?
Yeah, so both with yoga and Ayurveda, because they're the sister sciences from India, my parents, it was there were certain practices that are just a part of our life that I didn't identify as, oh, that's from Ayurveda or that's a yogic practice. No, that was just part of what we did. But as any, teenager growing up first gen in the United States, I was like, oh, everything you do is crazy. And I'm just going to go have some Tylenol. And before this, I would say it was really quite the opposite. I really bought into taking medication for anything. I never looked for alternative methods. I really just didn't know that was a big deal. I didn't know about organic, to be quite honest. Like, we're talking 15 some years ago. I heard about it, but I was like, I didn't understand the big deal. I didn't understand how much of our body mind connection matters, how much about the energy of what we put on our body matters. And it was such a revelation that left me feeling, it really helped to understand why I sort of went from being this incredibly vibrant person to this exhausted, brain fogged out person.
And at a young age.
Yeah.
Too
young, really, to be that way. So, it's kind of like you come back, which people always tell parents that their kids will. And I was like, Dad, you're genius. We should do this. Like, we should drink warm lemon water. You're right. Tongue scraping. Why did I tell you I wouldn't do it? I'll do it.
Right. It's so funny. And being a parent, yes, there are moments where I'm waiting for that day where I open the door and they come back and go, yeah, that, it really works,
Yeah.
But you were fortunate in the sense that your parents knew these things, where I think here in America, oftentimes people don't. And it's funny you bring up organic, people say to me, but it's too expensive. Okay. Do you want to pay now or do you want to pay later? There is a price. And I think it all boils down to, what do you value?
Correct.
And, I find that people spend their money in what they value. I do not drink coffee. I do not value Starbucks coffee. It's, I drink tea and I have my favorite teas here at the house. I will drink a tea at Starbucks if I'm away and I don't have my, where somewhere where I don't have tea accessible to me. But, that's not where I spend my money because it's not something I value. But I do, like you, value healthy foods, beautiful foods, tasty foods, and all things alternative. So,
Yeah.
well, I should take that back because I'm not talking about like smoking pot or something,
Yeah, it can be many different things.
Yeah, that could be twisted. I have to.
Even with the oils, it's all organic. And I think, it's not only when you say it's expensive, like, of course, organic is better for you for many different reasons, but also it's this vote towards the planet, right? It's this,
Yes.
I always say as women, we control most political decisions. It doesn't seem like that because everyone in the White House might be a white male, but really we control how policy is created by how we purchase because women purchase most everything. If we only bought organic, guess what the policy would be with farming?
Yeah.
And if we only bought things made in the US, guess what the trade policies would be?
Mm-hmm.
So we really do have this ability to control policy just by our purchasing habits. And so
absolutely,
when you buy organic or you buy something from a woman-owned company or something made in the US, that's a vote that you're placing to have policy that says, you know what, this is actually what we want.
Yeah. And that's where the change starts happening. I mean, I think about if you're eating 3 meals a day, let's say 3 regular meals versus 5 small meals, that's 21 times you get to vote a week. And then if you have a family of 4, like I have, well, 3 are still in the house, you multiply that. I mean, it is that powerful. And each decision, right, having intention when we're shopping and thinking about how it affects us, our children, our families, and then trickling down generations later. I agree with you.
That energy feeling, right? Like if you're eating a beautiful organic meal, you're like, okay, this is good for my body. It's good for the planet. Like karmically, it feels really good.
Yes.
The whole energy of it feels really great.
Yeah.
Whereas maybe if not, you're like, oh, maybe I didn't make the best choice. And, it does sometimes, even if you're not thinking about it, I feel like the energy is quite not the same.
Yes, for me, it's palpable. I'm energy sensitive. So definitely, I definitely feel the difference. And I think most young children feel it. I think it's just as time goes on, you start, and I want to say it becomes numbing, right? The more junk we put in, the more numb we become. And then we lose touch of being what it feels like to be in our body. And I'm sure you've seen that on the yoga mat where, having the mic on with 30 some odd, 40 people in the room. And you can see how some people are within their body and some are not. And I'm not saying that when I started on the yoga mat, I was in my body. I was not.
I was not either. I was everybody else's mat.
Yes, exactly. That's why we're new friends, Kavita. That's why we're new friends. So let's talk about conversations, because I know when I met you a couple of weeks ago, we have so many things in common, but conversations is one that I'm really passionate about. And of course, having a podcast only makes sense for that reason. But I feel like the art of conversation is a lost art, and it's being lost faster and faster each and every day. We have cell phones where we feel connected in some ways. I think back to when I was in college, I called my parents once a week. I had to get coins. I was in Manhattan. They were on Long Island. I had a payphone in the hallway. And so now we can track our son with Life 360. Oh, I'm not going to call him. He's at the football game, right. So I'll wait till later because I know he's busy right now. So we feel connected, but in the same sense, I know I wrote something you had said, and I loved it. We've lost what's real. So let's talk about that, because I agree with you, but I'd love to hear how you explain that.
I think it's this false sense of connection just by seeing somebody's pictures on social media or, you feel connected, like, oh, I saw their kids and I know about their life. And so I'm connected. But what's real is actually what's happening behind that, right? Behind that
Mhm.
photo. Was it really this beautiful moment? Or maybe there was some vulnerability there that I'm missing. So we're really missing the real connection. And because we feel like we're connected, we don't make the phone call. So it used to be, like I said, on my birthday, everyone would call me and I would have
Yeah.
this phone conversation. And there's something, again, energetically, when you speak to somebody on the phone, or even more so, of course, in person, that happens. But now I'm just getting the text. Right. And that's fine. I understand, because everyone's busy and it's like, okay, we just want to let you know we thought of you. And I appreciate that. But you're losing that real connection, the real opportunity to have the conversation of, how's your birthday really going?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe they missed the fact that I'm like, oh, it was great till I spilled coffee on myself and good things. Right. But this is the stuff that makes us laugh, that makes us connect, that brings true closeness.
Yeah.
And that's what's lost. So instead, you're just seeing my highlight reel. Right. And you're like, great, she's great. That's it.
Yeah. And I mean, it's lovely to have all these social media outlets, but at the same time, it it becomes exactly how you say. And texting is something I'm not really fond of. Most people know I'll be picking up the phone or I'll say, "Can you talk?" And it's not like I'm falling apart. I'm at the ER. You need to come help me, or I just rode in an ambulance and I need a ride home. It's more like I'd rather hear your voice. I'd rather, I think one of the big things about texts and emails and all of this is we don't hear the intonation, right? There's the 7-38-55 rule of 7% is exactly what we say, which is right, the text. And then we're missing the 38, the tone of our voice. I mean, sometimes us energy sensitive people can get the tone even in a text. You're like, where is that coming from?
But now it's just letters, right? It's like TYG.
Right.
You're like, okay, I hope you're good.
Exactly. And we're missing body language, and it's so true. Breaking things down to an acronym over text. I mean, there are times where I'm like, and what does that mean? And my husband will, or the kids will tell me, or sometimes it takes me a minute. I'm like, oh, okay.
Right. Yeah.
But I was in Marrakesh on a retreat, and I loved at 3 o'clock in our hotel every day, they served mint tea. And as a tea lover, I was in heaven. And of course, mint tea, when it's that hot, was even more phenomenal. And they brought out little tiny, Marrakesh sized treats that were really sweet. I thought American stuff was sweet, but this was really sweet. So now I know why they're like almost the size of a sugar cube, probably
Right.
2 times the size, and beautifully decorated. I mean, you almost don't want to eat them. But every day at 3 o'clock, they serve tea in the main areas so that you would sit down and actually sip your tea and have a conversation with somebody next to you.
Love it.
And I every day looked forward to 3 o'clock. It was just such a lovely, lovely thing. And the tea set, I mean, I had to come home with a from the YSL
Beautiful.
shop. Where am I? There's the camera. But I had to come home with a sterling teapot from that trip. But they would lift it high up and lower it down. And it always was, if you were at someone's home, it would be the oldest gentleman serving the tea. And it was just such a lovely, lovely ceremony that, of course, I wanted to come back and do it in my house. And the rest of the family was like, yeah, okay. I'm here. You're there. No, can't be home. But it just was amazing how people started to open up, be vulnerable, talk, to a stranger, what I believe is a new best friend, but what they may have seen as a stranger. And I think when we do that, we find out we have so many things to connect upon. Like I said to you, we could talk about a million things and we've just met thanks to Maury Mitchell, but it's fun. So tell me, for you, conversations, do you do you have any tricks or like, I'll give you, for example, I like to buy things that are conversation starters. So I have a kimono that is made out of soda pop tops, right? Reduce, reuse, recycle.
Oh.
It's amazing. It makes a little noise when you walk, right? And everybody wants to touch it. And I knew they would. That's why I bought it. And besides the fact that it's silver and it's fun, and it has my name all over it. When we passed it in the window, my whole family is like, you're going to buy that, right? I'm like, yeah, let me go in and just try it on, And they're like, you're going to buy it. We know it's you. But, I love buying things that are conversation starters because I think it gets people out of their comfort zone to come up and say, can I touch this? Or is that what I think it is? One man said, we walked into a restaurant and he said, I think she needs a sobriety check, I wasn't thinking about the fact that beer can come in a metal can. I was like, soda can tops? And then my husband's like, beer does come in cans, Gina. I was like, oh yeah, I don't drink beer, but okay, yes, I remember now, but it took me a second. So I had to catch up to him. But do you have tricks or things that you like to do?
Yeah. So I am actually a huge, huge believer in what I call random conversations.
Yes.
Talking to strangers. And I'll even share a story of how these random conversations have completely changed my life. But the way I do it is I usually, if I'm sitting next to someone, I just initiate like, hey, how's it going? Right. If we're on a plane, it's like, oh, what brings you to wherever? Yes. Is that home or is it not? So that's always an easy one, or a comment on something they're wearing, even if it's not a conversation starter. Like, oh, right. I love whatever. Where'd you get it? And just invite that person in. And sometimes they're like, here. And then they're like, why is someone talking to me?
I know I've had that too, but most of the time
people randomly airdrop me stuff. I'm like, are you trying to start a conversation in this room somewhere, but over text? Like, I don't understand. But I'll tell you 2 times when these random conversations completely transformed my life. So the first is, as you can imagine, the private equity world that I wanted to break into is a very much Ivy League white male world. Mm-hmm. There are not a lot of people who look like me there. So when I got my first interview call, I was psyched. And by the way, I applied to 80 places and I think I got 2 calls. So
yeah, it's not easy.
Yeah, not easy. So I got there, I walked in and literally everyone looked like this, exactly what you would think, almost like a Calvin Klein model in the black suit, straight out of Harvard. And I remember I ran into the bathroom and I was like, oh my God, I don't deserve to be here. What do I think I'm doing? I definitely, I look like I should be one of the secretaries like that. I just don't. And anyway, I got into the bathroom and there was a woman in there and she kind of looked upset. But it was my nature to just talk to people next to me. And I said, hey, I'm so nervous. I've got this interview. Not that she asked. Just, do you have any advice? I'm really jittery. And she's like, what would make you think that I would, be somebody that you could get advice even from? And I was like, oh, well, and she was a little bit older lady. And I was like, you just look like you've got your stuff together. And I was like, I could really use any words. I'm losing my mind. She's like, I can just tell you're going to be amazing, which is exactly what I needed to hear. So, I put my big girl pants up and, went through the interviews and, it was 20 interviews and, ended up getting the job, which was amazing. Well, fast forward a year when we do the recruiting process again, I was in the boardroom and it came down to a tie. And I was like, oh, it's a tie. How are we going to decide which candidate we're going to take? And they're like, oh, it's the same thing that happened with you. Susie, who's the woman I went in the bathroom, she decides. I was like, oh, thank you,
Susie. Timing, everything, right? Always good to go to the restroom.
But really, it was just a random conversation, right? I was vulnerable. I was real. Yes. And I connected with somebody just because they were there, right?
Yeah.
Similarly, the only reason I found the botanist was there was an insurance woman who was trying to sell me insurance. And I just appreciated her hustle. And I was like, you know what? This is a woman who I'm going to have coffee with because she is hustling. And I appreciate that. I know that. And the whole intention of this meeting for coffee was for her, right? I thought I was going to do her the favor.
Yeah.
Well, it turns out that she's the one who got me the client she introduced me to the botanist and then was like, you should actually go and be their CEO. Put that up. So again, I was like, oh, this random conversation I'm having with some woman I don't know who's just trying to sell me insurance, but you never know. So like have those real person connections.
Yeah. And just being open, I think that's the biggest thing. I had this conversation with a client recently who is just a delightful, delightful person, but living somewhere that doesn't really align with who she is at the moment, you know?
Yeah.
And I was like, but find ways to have conversation. You'll find your friends, you'll find, you know, your clients, you'll find these things. Just being open, like you said, vulnerability. I think that's a huge thing. I think we don't realize that when we become vulnerable, hey, I'm really nervous. Hey, I'm whatever the situation may be, fill in the blank, that we give others the ability to be vulnerable as well, to be safe, to be heard. And I think a lot of people I know a lot of people are yearning to be seen and heard, and not as this Instagrammable life, but for who they truly are, right? You didn't want the MD after your beautiful name. You didn't need that, right? And so being able to, you know, come back to who we were born to be instead of following tradition or following what the family beliefs are or what that of our community is. Well, as a woman of 54, Gina, your hair should be blonde and long. I don't know. You know, I live in California, so you know, and I lived in Charlotte, and I was one, you know, but the good thing was people could find me. My hair is dark. It stands up in a crowd. They can see me, right? You know, I always said I made the best chaperone for my kids' field trips because all they had to do was look up and they would find me. So, but you know, I think it's hard sometimes for people to know, well, where do I start? And I love the random conversations. I never thought of it as titling it as that, but yeah, I usually smile. And then, you know, I love teaching people that smiling is more contagious. I used to say than the flu. Now I can say COVID, even though that's a word I don't like using, but people get it, you know, just smiling at people may allow them to warm up and come say hello. You never know what somebody's day is like, where they're at, what's weighing heavy on their mind. Are they at a job where they have a toothbrush in their top drawer of their desk, you know, where they're just, you know, using toothpicks to keep their eyes open. And maybe that smile just makes their day. So vulnerability. The other thing I wanted to mention is you were talking about your truths, right? That you said to her your truth that, hey, I'm a little nervous going into this. What advice? And I think that's important. Why do we feel that we have to hide what is really on our heart at that moment? You know, I mean, yes, you should not speak if you're going to tear somebody down. I agree with that, right? Yoga teaches us when to speak and when to not speak because it's not appropriate. But if it's our truth and it's, you know, if it's how we feel, you know, I see it in marriages, I see it in businesses, I see it in friendships with the women and men that I work with. And it's like, no, you know, if you say it in a way that, hey, this is how I'm feeling right now.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. And I always say, you know, never say it in the moment, right? Give it a day or two. So that's
right.
And hopefully you won't come out yelling and super harsh. And I said, look, everyone has a right to feel their feelings. So
yeah,
you can just approach it and say, I know you might not perceive the reality this way, but this is how I'm seeing it. And this is how I'm feeling. And then that person can decide whether they want to change or adjust or not.
Mm-hmm.
But at least you've had a chance you've given them the opportunity to change. Because I think the other thing is because we don't communicate, we often just are like, oh, of course they should know that they're being annoying and that was so rude. It's obvious. And I'm like, well, it might not be obvious to them. Why not state the obvious, be the master of this, and give them the opportunity to make it better?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I know you and I both also are firm believers in living our purpose. And I had written a note the other day when we spoke. You believe in purpose and being of service. So let's give a voice to that now.
Yeah. So to me, I think my purpose was always to be sort of this voice to the voiceless. And I'm really into human design, which I think I mentioned. And so that's
Yeah.
in my chart.
Mhm.
So for me, that's always looked as how can we give back into communities? How can we educate and be of service? And so that's where I've spent a lot of my time when it comes to donation, time or money. And then
Mhm.
as far as purpose goes, I really feel it's this belief of helping people come back to their true nature
Yes.
with nature.
Yeah.
So I do that through oils and different spiritual practices that I share with our audience. But that to me, at this point, seems like that is my purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say it is because you glow from the inside. And I think that we are living our purpose. And believe me, I do believe with human design, you know, as well, our purpose kind of shifts around age. I want to say 44, but I think it's 42. Forgive me. Don't know why I'm seeing 44. Maybe I was a late bloomer. But there are times when we're in different stages or different chapters in our life, and our purpose may be very different. When I was taking care of Mark and advocating for his health while he lay fighting for his life, that was a very different time for me. I couldn't have a business. I couldn't have a podcast. I couldn't be blogging and have a television show and working with clients one on one. There was just no time. And so, I think it's important to also say everyone's purpose is different and you can step into it however big or small you wish. I mean, it doesn't have to be owning your own company and touching the lives the way you do. I know I've had people years ago say to me, you need to do webinars and you need to do group events. And I kept saying, that's not how I work. My work is on a soul level. I did group yoga classes years ago, group bar, paddleboard yoga, paddleboarding, etc. And it was delightful. But that's not where I am now. I like one-on-one soul level work and really getting deep and making an impact in someone's life who's then going to be a change maker like you and get out there and do things in a huge way versus me touching 30 people who, I don't know where it's going to go and I can't go as deep with them. And I think it's important for us to, like you said, human design's a great way. I partnered with Sabine Kaiser, who's my a face reading expert. And so we use that I used to use human design prior to clients starting with me as the foundation, but now I use face reading, both ancient and modern techniques. But, find a way where you come together and match up or align with your purpose, because that's when we glow from the inside out, like you are glowing, Kavita. And I think we're meeting a very different person than the woman who was working in the world of finance. Would you agree?
Yes, well, we wouldn't be having a conversation because
No, we probably,
so yeah, you just wouldn't have met me at all.
I would have been like, where is she? Behind which door? Behind which door? I can't find her. What do you mean she's busy? I need her. She's supposed to be live. Yeah, that's so funny. Funny and sad. But for those who are in those positions, today, we feel you and we understand it's not easy. But please know, I liken it to the Monopoly game. When I left that 265 department store buying position, I felt like I passed go and collected $200. I mean, honestly. And I took a job that was way beneath my education just to tide me over. And it took 3 months. I remember walking with a girlfriend named Karen, and we usually walk 3 miles when we got together. And we walked, and I said, today is the first day I feel like, back then I was just Gina Meyer, wasn't married yet, but I was like, I actually feel like me, because I had given up so many pieces of myself to be in that career, in that position, in that misery, and there's no amount of money, not that I was making the money you did, in the fashion world. It's not as lucrative. But it's what I went to college for. So, it was heartbreaking to leave, which I don't know. Was it heartbreaking for you at the time, or were you like, just get me out of here?
I think it's like I didn't know better. So I just thought, well, maybe I'll come back in a different way, or maybe I just thought I'd come back to finance in some way or another.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, everything I learned was about business, right?
Yes.
And that, of course, translated.
Yeah.
But I think one of the biggest things for me to learn and let go of was ego, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was there was definitely a period of time when people are like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I sell oils, right? And it's this, and I actually see it a lot with my friends who are stay-home moms, which I think is a beautiful job to,
right.
To dedicate yourself to your children and serve in that way. But I know that's another thing of ego, of when you're at a party, or, it's the expectation of what you feel like you need to be. And so I think for me, it was more of a, oh my God, what will I tell people I do?
Exactly. Yeah. That is, so
yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
And then I realized nobody cares what I do. Like we have all this thing like, oh, they're going to think this. And no, they're not thinking about you. Everyone's thinking about you. And so it was this beautiful, realization, I think at around 40, where I was like, nobody's thinking about me. I can do whatever the hell I want. I can be whoever I want.
Right.
However I want. People just care about how you make them feel and the connection you have with them.
Correct. Yeah.
It's literally that easy.
Yeah. And I think the right people, right? So the people who are wondering, what is she doing? Maybe those people who also had their toothbrush at their desk. Those weren't the people that you really felt like you were probably going to remain connected with. And I think that there comes a point in our life we have to realize our resources. I know a lot of people think it's just our money, but it's our time, energy, and money. Right. And how do we spend them? And I know I've had many conversations with my husband where he's like, kind of a little appalled. And my husband is like, everybody loves Mark. He can do no wrong. He's just a kind, gentle soul. And, but I'm like, I want to invest my time and energy with people who I connect with, and I can have a deep conversation, and we can be nodding and laughing and saying, oh yeah, I've done that. Oh yeah, me too. Twice as big as you, like spilling the coffee. Oh yeah, done that. Mm-hmm. Mine is tea, and it's usually a giant, to-go cup. But, he would be like, but this person's lovely. And yeah, they are lovely, but I want to connect. I want depth. I want meaning. I want this. For me, there's richness, and I'm not talking about dollar signs or diamonds or platinum and gold bars, but this meaning, this significance. And that's what I think, when I met you, I was like, oh yeah, we're going to have a fun conversation because you get it, and you're on this same playing field. So I'd love to
bear conversations where it's just like, hey, how are you? But they don't even wait to hear.
Right. And they're on.
Did you care?
Or they have their phone. Hey, how are you? And then next thing they're like,
oh, yeah, I'm dying. Okay. And I wait to see if they say anything. Like, how are you? I'm dying.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, it is so true and funny, but that I can see that visual. You have me cracking up. I'll be laughing all afternoon. But today I'd love to pull a card from the Opening to Possibilities deck. So these were a passion project of mine for exactly what we're talking about, for people to connect on a deeper, richer level. And they have flowers on them. They're designed for women, but ironically, a coach had them in her house, a life coach who I know who uses them with her clients, had them in her house, and her son-in-law, who's a big basketball guy, took them and he said, let's play this. How do you play? And they had a great time connecting. So it was rather funny when she told me. I was like, oh, that, I'm glad it worked, because the intention was for men, women alike. But of course, they're a little floral. So I'm glad he had no problem looking at the orange flower and going past it. So I will thumb through as best I can. And then if you can just say when, and I'll stop. As I'm trying not to drop them.
When?
Okay. Love, of course. So do everything in love, which I think you do. The question is, 3 questions are, do you agree? What challenges can arise? And how do you overcome them?
What challenges can arise and how do I overcome them?
Mm-hmm. I know you do everything in love, because I feel it through the camera.
So I think challenges arise in the everyday with different emotions that we have, right? So it's either the feeling of not good enough, the feeling of fear, the feeling of, I think it's always it's a feeling, right? That doesn't serve you. And that's to me what the challenge is, because if my car breaks down, the challenge is not that my car broke down because I know what to do. The challenge is that I'm feeling frustrated, right? Or I can't get my kid dressed for school. That's not actually the challenge, is how it makes me feel. So that's how I always take the challenge, is how am I feeling? And how I overcome it is I really do, and it's funny that it says love, I really do just come from a place of love. So I said, well, if I loved myself or I love my child, what is the response?
Yeah.
Right. And I think when you do that, you take out a little bit of the rush.
Yes.
Because really, I think it's the lack of time that we always think that we're running against. So it's like, yes, I got a flat tire. Yes, that sucks. But what am I really upset about? It's that I'm in a rush to go somewhere.
Right.
Right. And so I think that, and I really love Gabby Bernstein's The Universe Has My Back. So a lot of times I'm like, oh, this happened because the universe has my back.
Right. I mean, it's just, I like to keep, and I give each of my clients a 1 minute hourglass. Yeah. And I say, like down dog, right? When we flip ourselves upside down, the room changes, everything. And when we think about little kids on the monkey bars, I don't even know, is that politically correct? I don't know what they're called these days.
I think they are.
My kids are always on top of me. That's not politically correct. Okay, well, what is? So, but when they hang upside down on the jungle gym, maybe that's what it's called. Yeah. They can change the way things look, and we have oxygen to our brain and so forth. And I think, for me, living here in sunny Southern California now, I always plan in Charlotte too, plan extra time in my calendar to drive places. Especially here, because everything's so new and beautiful and exciting to me, from the mountains to the ocean. I can see both and at the same time, and palm trees and red tile roofs, which is I think that was my purpose, to be surrounded by palm trees, sunshine, mountains, and ocean. Right. And it's my, like your essential oils, it's equivalent. That energy is my prescription every day. But you're so right about time, and how people get so 4-letter word that I tell my children they're not allowed to use, which is BUSY. And I said, you can curse, you can do other words, but busy, I do not want to hear, because you can control that, with what you're focusing on. What things can you give up that you don't need to do, Of course, that's hard conversation with a 21-year-old in his senior year as a double major at USC. But, there are, I always check in.
I just had with my 13-year-old son. So I think it's,
But I always check in and say, are you doing something fun? I knew you were going to ask that. So yes, I'm going here. Okay, good. because it's wonderful that you're studying and challenging yourself the way you do. But I always want to make sure that 3-letter word, fun, where you're connecting either with yourself. He loves to bike to the beach in Santa Monica, sometimes with a friend, sometimes by himself. But, are you doing some nice things where you're really filling yourself up, like you were talking about, giving back, being of service, being in purpose? And so, Kavita, it's been so delightful to have you here with me today and sharing just so transparently and candidly and being vulnerable your journey. I'd love for you to share, if you don't mind, the name of your website. And I believe that you have a special offer for everyone today of 30% off. So I'd love for you to share, if you don't mind.
Yes, of course. So the website is Sahai, so it's Sahai, and we have essential oils and custom face oils, and you can take your human design quiz on the website as well. And you can use Gina30 to get 30% off all of it, the whole site. So I really invite you to have a look, see if connecting to nature and some of the self-care activities we have that go with it really help you.
Wonderful. And human design is a lot of fun. I would highly encourage you to take the quiz. You'll learn, I think sometimes we, like I said earlier, give up pieces of ourselves, whether in our marriage, with our kids, in our career, all of the above. And human design is lovely because it brings us back to our truths, our heartfelt desires, and our purpose. So thank you for that. And for those of you who are wondering what your X factor is, I'd love to invite you to Purpose, Possibilities, and Prosecco, a private 2-hour transformation like no other. And that information, along with Kavita's information, along with her discount, will be here in the show notes. Kavita, thank you again. You're such a bright, shiny soul. It's delightful to meet you in this format and have a how would I say, a deep conversation and fulfilling conversation with you.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed speaking with you.
Thank you. Till next time, be exquisite.